I wonder if Simon's done artwork for every time someone's called the end of Bitcoin or the death of crypto.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go, next week. I gotta say, Simon's job sounds very fun. I'm like, I picked the wrong player.
This is the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds.
Well, I couldn't be sitting in between two more diverse people, yet we just talked about this morning before we went live that we all, in some ways, went to the same school together. So
small world, New Zealand.
It is a small world. So it's pretty. It's
we're all the same age too, right?
We are all the same age,
I guess, roughly.
Must be.
Yeah.
So we're incredibly young, and
at the peak of our careers.
At the peak of our careers, and we're all brought together by cryptocurrency and crypto assets, which I think, I guess, summarises the beauty of this asset class. I think before we delve into the asset class themselves, though, it would be fantastic to start with both of your journeys. So perhaps, Simon, we'll start with you. I last saw you in high school. What happened?
What happened? Yeah, great question. Well, after high school, I went to the University of Auckland, and I studied fine art at the Elam School of Fine Arts, which is the University of Auckland's art school. And after that, I immediately got a job as a librarian at the university library, which was great. And I worked there while I started a kind of an exhibiting career here in New Zealand. Met a gallerist, Michael Lett, who's still an important partner of mine. And he introduced me to the international art world because we went to Basel together, which is like the most important city for art fairs. So Art Basel and Lister, which is the younger gallery that we did at the time, younger fair we did at the time, did that in 2006 and met tons and tons of people, and then decided I wanted to also work elsewhere. Met a number of people, met a curator here in New Zealand from Germany who told me about this amazing art school in Frankfurt. And then, so I applied to this art school in Frankfurt, went to Frankfurt. It's this space called the Städelschule, which is like run by a museum there, different than things here, how some art schools are part of museums, others are part of universities. And then Frankfurt, 2009, I moved to Berlin because nobody stayed in Frankfurt. But interestingly, financial center, Frankfurt, amazing place to move to actually. And then set up a studio in Berlin and have been working out of there ever since, going to different places, making shows in museums and commercial galleries in the States and different parts of Europe and Asia and here. I've been back here a number of times working with Michael and other museums and galleries. Some career highlights, I guess. I represented New Zealand at the Venice Biennale, which is the oldest, I think, art biennale, which is kind of like an art festival for people that make fine arts. I did that in 2015. The same year, which I had a survey show at the Museum of Modern Art's PS1 gallery in New York, and the Serpentine galleries in London. So that's kind of was like a moment there. And actually, just at that moment, during my Serpentine show, I started to get really interested in crypto. The work up until that point had been focused a lot on the storytelling of technologists, like how technologists show us the world, like what tools they give us to understand the world with stories. And I think storytelling is a very big component of technology businesses in general, and definitely of crypto. And so when crypto came along, when I heard about Vitalik and Ethereum, actually, that's not quite true. I'd heard about crypto before. I'd heard about Bitcoin before 2015, but only because my friends in Berlin were buying drugs, not me, with it. That was like the way that...
Oh, as the payment system.
Yeah.
See, a lot of these things do start in the criminal underworld.
That's right.
Criminals are very good early adopters.
Underworld, yeah. No, so early adopters, 2011, I think, was when I first, was at a party and they were like, oh, yeah, we got some acid in the post. And I was like, acid in the post? And I'm like, yeah, you get the Bitcoin and you did. And I was like, not doing that. But yeah, then I started to make work about Ethereum, and in the 2016 Berlin Biennale, there's biennales all over the world, I made a big piece about different pathways, different stories that were being told about crypto, including designing some postage stamps that were printed by the German post system, kind of featuring the dollar, Bitcoin, and ETH. And they're kind of different stories. How I saw those stories as differently told at the time, because there were already people in 2015 and 16, as I guess you probably know, telling stories from different, like claiming different things for crypto. So people like Blythe Masters telling stories about how it could be useful for banking, and I focused on also Balaji Srinivasan at that time. Balaji was already very visible as an influencer, I guess, in the space, and I focused on his claims around Bitcoin, and then Vitalik, who is very magnetic guy even then. And from there, I went on to do shows about crypto in New York, and I met people at Consensus. I was at the Consensus meetup in early 2017, and showed some work there, which was kind of an interesting moment. Also went to Davos in 2018 to talk with the Consensus people, including Joe Lubin, at a kind of pavilion at Davos, which was also a very interesting moment around the adoption of crypto. And then at that time, I started to get to know artists who were working with crypto explicitly. Up until that point, I'd just been making kind of normal installations and videos and these types of things, not working with crypto as a medium as such, just more making exhibitions about crypto. And I met these artists who were kind of on the fringes of my museum gallery world, who were producing super interesting things using Ethereum as a network, and I then got to know more people in it. Some people who had worked off a Scribe, which was like I think a side chain or a kind of offshoot of Bitcoin or colored coin, something like that, early, and they'd been kind of putting assets linked to the Bitcoin blockchain through that, so kind of an early version of an NFT. And then retroactively I realized I was actually at this event at the New Museum in New York in 2014, 7-on-7, when one of the first NFTs were supposedly claimed, this monograph piece, colored coin, offshoot there. So I was actually at that event. I have a video of myself walking out of that session.
in disgust.
Yeah, I was just busy, too busy to notice the revolution happening around me. But yeah, anyway, I also got into curating the other artists' work, making early work with Ethereum, and made a couple of exhibitions as a curator along those lines in 2018 and 2021 as the whole thing changed. I mean, 2020, suddenly there were far more people interested in art on, after DeFi summer, there was a lot more money going around in these circles, and it wasn't just, certain very eccentric people trying to make crazy things. It was really like people were starting to get very, very interested, and I think that interest peaked in February, March of 2021, and since then I've also been involved in trying to understand a very interesting and volatile art world as it emerges. It's like a new art world, which is also really exciting, and made various NFT projects during 2021 and 22, some with museums in kind of normal art world contexts, and others really focusing on more kind of crypto-first communities, which has been an interesting difference, actually. Like the legacy art world, let's say, is still really coming to terms with what the crypto art world is.
It's really interesting you say that, and that journey is really interesting because it sounds like it didn't just all of a sudden hit you and you thought this is going to be this massive asset class and I should really jump into this. It sort of bubbled away over many years, and then all of a sudden do you reflect back on it and think, whoa, how did I even start with this? And now it's a massive thing.
Yeah. Absolutely, like all the time, because also, I mean, 2019 was quiet, man. Like it was really, and everybody, I made this artwork with what? That's really complicated, and how much is it worth now? Like, are you sure you're spending time on that?
But what's fascinating about your journey from an art perspective is that's exactly how the financial world saw it from an investment asset class perspective.
Right.
You're sitting there and, between 2010 and 2020, Bitcoin went up 48 million%.
Right.
Yet it will never catch on.
Right.
It's an asset class that no one ever is going to be.
And we're back there, kind of, right? I don't know. You're in the
absolutely. And But actually, can you afford not to own it for the next 10 years? 48 million% is quite a high watermark to sort of beat. But it's interesting that you got in the art world, you get the same reaction as you do in the financial world, even though they're looking at it from completely different spheres.
Yeah, and one of the voices that like I said, I've always made art about kind of technologists and storytelling, and so I listen a lot to figures in technology, and I'll never forget this Mark Andreessen phrase, which comes up quite a lot, which is all about how it's never over. It always looks like it's over after like a boom moment. And then you always think you're too late. And I remember like Mark Andreessen saying he thought he was too late with Netscape, too late to start, being involved in this internet thing,
It'll never catch on.
Never catch on, and you miss the boat, Yeah.
So Janine, I guess in the same journey that, in the same context of Simon's journey and my much shorter journey in crypto, yours was probably completely different to get you to where you are today. How do you go from Auckland Normal Intermediate to the CEO of New Zealand's largest crypto platform?
Yeah, so since I saw Simon last, and when we were 11 or 12, I actually went on to become a high school dropout, so a little bit of a different journey there. And then I did end up at university. I did economics and finance, which gave me a really good grounding, I guess, in understanding financial markets and just a real interest in how those things work. And not that long after that, I came across Bitcoin, the gateway drug for most people or many people into cryptocurrency. And I sort of saw this thing and I was like, well, that makes so much sense because we have, with the internet, a global village, a way to communicate globally instantly, but we don't have this payment system to support that. And obviously payments are a really critical part of how our world engages. And, as an economics background, I was like, sort of money drives everything. So I saw that Bitcoin seemed to make a lot of sense. I bought a few. I didn't obviously see its potential as a massively speculative asset because that's not what it was about. It was about a functional payment system. And so that's when I got involved, was 2014. And then for a very long time, nothing happened. And, that quote of we overestimate change in 2 years and underestimate it in 10 or vice versa. I think that's very true for how I saw crypto. I was like, well, this thing should obviously catch on because it's solving a very real problem. But of course, that requires, there's a lot more that needs to happen, and particularly what Simon was talking about around the perceptions of this industry, how complex it is, people just looking at it from the outside and going, that's not going to catch on, that's too hard, it's, why bother? So then with that complexity of crypto was really hard to get into. 2017 hit, we had that, big bull run, everyone in the media was talking about it. At that stage, I was actually working at a bank, and as I was the only person in the bank that sort of seemed to know anything about crypto, I got called on to give all these presentations and talks, and I became an overnight expert in cryptocurrency because, if a subject matter is small enough, it's not that hard to learn a lot about it quite quickly.
Well, at least be a day ahead of everybody
Exactly.
else.
I was like, whatever question people ask me, I was like, Google that. Okay, now I know more than I did yesterday, which is really the theme with cryptocurrency. It's very hard to be an expert in the space because it moves so fast, it's changing so rapidly. But if you're always learning and always sort of being curious, then, you'll be a one step ahead. So working at the bank, a lot of people were asking me about cryptocurrency, about how to get involved. And at that stage in New Zealand, it was very difficult to buy. There were only a few local providers and the pricing was sort of around 15 to 20% above the international price, which for a fully digital asset with no shipping costs seemed a bit perverse. And then, of course, with the international players, you had all the complexity of moving funds overseas, you had all the complexity around wallets, the delays. There was, a lot of difficulty in the process. So my brother, who is the co-founder of Easy Crypto, set out to solve this problem, making it easier for Kiwis to get involved and making it fairer with pricing being much more in line with the global markets. And I came on board to help him do that in a way which was legal and compliant and, not just selling strangers crypto from his bank account. And that was really the genesis of Easy Crypto, and we went on to become the largest provider in New Zealand. We've also expanded into a couple of other markets internationally. We have over 100 staff now working in 11 different countries, and I think we've just recently ticked over $2 billion in total trades through the platform, which, for people thinking cryptocurrency is a bit of a fringe thing, that's just our New Zealand business has done $2 billion in sales over the years that we've been trading. So it's definitely something that Kiwis are interested in and adopting, and is growing at a constant but still relatively early stage. So haven't missed the boat. There's not that many New Zealanders involved still. It's still a little bit fringe, but it is definitely a growing industry.
That's an amazing story, and I guess it's one thing being an entrepreneur in an asset, in a service or a good or a technology that people are used to, but in something that is completely fringe, to be able to break into that market. How do you do it? How do you get, especially in New Zealand, you said the New Zealand part of it maybe is still quite fringe and small, but there are a lot of naysayers out there in crypto, and New Zealanders as well. How do you get funding, start a business, grow it, get support, get government backing in a way, in an asset class that people are still very sceptical on?
I will be honest and say that we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We're just like, here's a problem, we can solve it. And we just sort of went step by step from there. But it was incredibly difficult. I mean, it still is. Things that you would take for granted if you were starting a business, like, what are the basics of a business? Getting a bank account, getting insurance, being able to advertise on, platforms, all of those things were closed to us. As a crypto business, it's very hard to get banking. When we started, YouTube, Google, Facebook, all of those digital platforms would not allow us to advertise. Most of them still don't. And so all of these things that, are just kind of 101 of business and entrepreneuring were not open to us. We had to find different ways. We had to be very innovative, a lot of hustle. And it was a really hard first couple of years. And there were a lot of times that I just almost packed it all in because I was like, I just can't deal with another bank saying no or another regulator, finding out that there was technically maybe GST on cryptocurrency, and we were possibly, selling a product with 1% margin when we owed 15% in GST. Like, that was a nightmare moment to go through. And all these kind of things that in a traditional market, something that is well understood, well regulated, embraced by the mainstream, you just don't have those sort of difficulties. And so I mean, your comment around getting government support, I mean, that has still yet to happen. I think that's an area which there is a real opportunity for New Zealand to have, an advantage in this area. Like, something that you could think of it as, say, regulatory arbitrage. If New Zealand were a country that had really clear, really innovative and, open regulation for this space, we could attract a lot of businesses in, because that complexity, that uncertainty of not having clear regulatory guidance is very hard for companies in blockchain and crypto. And it's if we look at this, with the idea of this is the next wave of internet invention and adoption, it is a, creation of value and transfer of digital value is an immense opportunity and something that will have a very huge impact on how our world works in the future. That's going to be an industry and an economic impact for New Zealand that could be absolutely immense, and a really big opportunity if we were to grab that.
And not just rely on property prices going up and exporting milk powder.
Exactly, yeah.
Sounds quite sensible. Simon, I think the interesting thing about where your journey's taken you is that art is at the forefront of social trends. Mm. And so when you think about your career and how it's shaped crypto, because as an artist, but also crypto has shaped what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I'm not overly interested about the current price movements, and we'll talk about that at the moment.
Sure.
This asset class is going to be volatile. But where do you see it going? Because you perhaps are at right at the precipice of where this asset class goes next, and maybe that's also related to NFTs. But how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I am a little bit domain specific, I think, in my knowledge, because, as you say, it's so vast and you kind of don't know exactly. So from an artist perspective and from an NFT perspective, I think there's a lot more to happen sooner. I think, as I say, when I first made an artwork in 2016 at a major art biennale about crypto, I really literally had to produce and explain a video about what it was, because otherwise I couldn't do anything sophisticated in terms of saying what it is. You can't just put I don't know, it's like a number in front of people and expect them to resonate with it, when you're making an artwork.
And sort of an IKEA instruction manual.
Yeah, exactly. So I hired an advertising company. I mean, this is part of my artistic language anyway. I use the language of commerce a lot. But anyway, I produced a kind of... It was an art video, but it was also an explainer video to kind of explain what the claims around blockchain at least were looking like at the time, and then I could kind of do something with it, Now you don't have to do that anymore. You say blockchain, you say Bitcoin, even say Ethereum, and, you might even say Polygon or something else. People know what they're talking about. NFTs as a kind of, as a story made making art in this space a lot more broadly appealing. And I think the other thing is, art relies a lot on different ways of funding, and I think there's a lot of people willing to do a lot of risky things in the crypto world who have money, and a lot of people who are, I think, investors in crypto are attracted to doing things that don't always make sense to everybody else. And I think art is very comfortable in that space, but always needs partners to help do crazy things. That's what we do. Like, art is by definition an exception. If it's not an exceptional thing, it's just a thing. So I'm always looking for partners who have vision and appetite to do things that are completely crazy. And I find that more and more in crypto easier to find than in the traditional spaces where art usually gets funding. We're lucky in New Zealand to have a lot of government support for art, but that is very highly competitive, and it tends to focus on a particular mandate that is set at a centralized level. I think one of the nice things about a space like crypto, and I mean, I'm based in Germany, but I also always think of myself as like an international person. I guess I feel a cultural affiliation with people who like crypto too, because the kind of supranational conception of the self is something that I think I really relate to. Like, I'm a permanent resident in Germany, grew up in New Zealand. New Zealand's got a complicated history of self and claims to the space. I feel much more comfortable saying I'm internet first and kind of like everything else second. And I think I don't know. That's a bit of a rambling answer. I see the future as, I guess, short answer. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think it's easier than ever to start conversations with people who are interested in doing crazy things, doing crazy cultural things. And I think there's a lot more to come. Whether NFTs as an asset class continue to be super important to that infrastructure, or whether there's other crypto-based infrastructure for art, I'm not sure. But I guess because there's a lot of investment and care already given into NFTs, some version of NFTs will happen. I'm really excited about the merge, the emergent Ethereum coming together, the moving to proof of stake.
Can you explain to our listeners what that means in practice?
Yeah, sure. So you guys will know this, but Bitcoin is based on, which is the first cryptocurrency of its kind, is based on this consensus mechanism called proof of work, which basically is a system that relies on a bunch of different gaming computers around the world in various different formations, doing kind of cryptographic problems and using that to assign kind of voting power in a way. And rewarding you with currency, the people that run those systems. That whole way of doing blockchain is only one way. It's the first way, it's the biggest way, it's the most decentralized way. But Ethereum, which was an early kind of version of that system as well, also running proof of work, has since a long time been looking to change, because there's some inefficiencies with that. There's some, as everybody knows, questions around power usage and how much power proof of work as a system uses, and they're looking to move to proof of stake. There are other already existing proof of stake chains. Very visible in the art world is Tezos. A lot of NFTs on Tezos, which is a proof of stake first chain. But Ethereum is by far the biggest and most distributed chain that will be running, I guess, on proof of stake if when their merge happens. They first tried to move from proof of work to proof of stake, or at least claimed they were going to try and do it in 2019. So it's been a long story of moving. But I guess I can imagine why. There's been several tests and versions of it. Many test nets, which are kind of pre-mainnet, like, I don't know, backstage networks, have already moved. And actually yesterday, Gurley, which is one of the most prominent test nets, moved also to proof of stake. But in theory, in the middle of September, the mainnet will also move to proof of stake, which is being called the merge.
It's quite hard to make it happen when there's no head office of Ethereum in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's really funny.
Make the decisions.
Actually, one of the things I do have ended up doing by accident is I advise Art Basel, which is the largest art fair, on their kind of interactions with Bitcoin and blockchains. And I sat down with some of the people at Art Basel, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're looking to get into this. We really want to partner with a blockchain." And yeah, but you can't just call Vitalik. That's not the way it works.
Can we catch up?
Yeah,
exactly. Talk about a partnership. We've got some really good things in common.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it's going to be a really exciting moment when proof of stake is.
Why is it exciting?
Because it'll change the dynamics of the network quite significantly, and nobody really knows how. And I think that's one of the cool things about crypto in general is you just never know where it's going. And proof of stake, as much as you can test it on test nets, when you move it onto mainnet, nobody knows what it's going to do to the price. Nobody knows what it's going to do to the functionality. In theory, it'll speed things up, make things easier, make things quicker, but like it will... critics say that it will centralize in terms of decision making, because instead of like having to set up a bunch of machines all over the world and relying on a network of machines that are already set up in a quite distributed fashion because of the way that the network has grown, proof of stake very, very basically like relies on people staking some of the ETH that they already have as a kind of substitute for the mining process. With machines, and nobody really knows what it'll mean when people who are holding a lot of ETH get those decision-making kind of votes rather than people in this other network of hardware. So a lot of unknowns, but I guess it could mean that it's easier to adopt, that it's faster to use, that some of these kind of pushbacks on crypto and Ethereum in particular about price and price of getting a transaction done and speed of settling a transaction will completely disappear.
And the media headlines around environmental impact
will also disappear. So I guess it could mean a lot more interest, a lot more adoption, a lot quicker, etc. That's what other people are saying. In some ways, but there will be people who want to discredit the move to proof of stake, say that proof of work is a much better system, etc., more distributed. So I don't know. It's very hard to tell. But I imagine net effect for the art world, it'll mean that more people are hearing about the network, easier to get into the network. Potentially will be easier for people to build things on top of the network, which work more like non-crypto things, and therefore makes it easier for people to get involved in art, buy art, sell art, make art. So yeah,
it's sort of almost the mum and dad test. They might be able to start socializing with it.
Yeah, I think that's like a secondary effect. Like first layer, all these things become easier and quicker in theory, and then it'll be easier for the application layer on Ethereum to be like more consumer.
Janine, Simon has a huge amount of knowledge in it. You have a huge amount of knowledge on the space.
Just one day here.
I'm still on Wikipedia trying to spell Ethereum. When you are trying to grow a business into a market like New Zealand, where the knowledge base in general is pretty low, how do you communicate and upskill your current and potential clients and customers to get them to the knowledge base that someone like Simon has? Because if they did, they would be using it a lot more, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think it's something that's very individual. Like at Easy Crypto, we've got a huge emphasis on education. We think it's really important to give people the opportunity to learn as much as they want in the space. I think, education is power, information is power, and having the opportunity for people to get accurate, informed views on things like, what is Ethereum, how does it work, why should I be interested, what, potential does it open in the future. And for a lot of people, they might start with cryptocurrency because they've heard of it as a speculative asset. They'll, maybe dip their toes in and then start to go down that rabbit hole of learning more about it and understanding, like, there is this real, cult around cryptocurrency of what it means as a democratic, decentralized value transfer that sits outside of government, outside of banks. And that's a really compelling narrative going back to, sort of the stories that we tell around cryptocurrency.
Because there's the I'm in lockdown during COVID and I want to make a quick buck because I'm bored and there's no sport to bet on. But they're actually the core of the users are around this entirely different driver, which is that wanting to get away from government control and having a bit more freedom around decisions. And do you see that as the main network that uses Easy Crypto at the moment, or what's the balance there?
I think that's, from what I've seen, is like the very, very early adopters, like back in 2014, 2015, even earlier, like those were people who had that sort of get outside of the government systems, have, maybe to buy drugs, like Simon was saying, but, a lot of them also just really driven by this idea of financial autonomy and financial freedom. And, at the moment, we don't actually control the funds in our bank accounts. We live in a country which is very lawful. We have pretty good confidence that if we go to the bank, we'll get our money back out. But in a lot of countries, that's not the case. And historically, that hasn't always happened. And so the idea of having full autonomy and control over your money is a very powerful story in crypto and something that brought a lot of people into it originally. what we see today is I don't think most people come into crypto for that. They're probably not even aware of that. But that is one of the education avenues that people can go down and, really get interested in. But I don't think it's the majority of people. I don't think most sort of mum and pop investors out there or retail investors, that's probably not what interests them. And it's quite an interesting trade-off in cryptocurrency because you have this opportunity for very sovereign control of your own wealth, but that trades off against simplicity and ease of use, and all the stories about people losing access to their funds, losing their own keys. In cryptocurrency, there isn't a help desk that you can call to be like, oh, I locked myself out of my account. Can you let me back in? You are fully in charge of your own wealth, or you can be. And if you do choose to be fully in charge of your own wealth, that is completely, at your risk and at your cost, that if you mess up or if you, lose that hard drive in a landmine, in a landfill, that there's no coming back. So I think for us at this point in the industry, it's just a really interesting dichotomy between that sovereignness, but also the desire for people to have someone else look after their money and someone else be that backstop. And I think it's an interesting...
And the social acceptance that that's just going to be okay.
Yeah, and also like the social change for people of, do I actually want to be in control of my own money, or do I want a third party to still hold that for me because I trust a third party more than I trust myself? And I think what we're going to see going forwards is probably both of those things being, there will be those two different camps in crypto, the hold it yourself and the have someone else hold it for you. And I don't think the hold it yourself will ever win over the mainstream because it's just not... what we're used to, what we want, and perhaps what that common narrative is, unless we get to a point where we really can't trust governments and banks. But I don't think in New Zealand that's anytime soon.
It's interesting, Simon, you might have a view on this, but when you're talking in the US about crypto, that is right at the forefront, is that, the complete mistrust of government.
Right.
And perhaps one of the drivers of why early adoption happened there, so much faster than anywhere else. Do you get that sense in Europe as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question, and particularly I'm really interested to hear, Janine, and actually you both speak about what it's like in New Zealand, because I don't have so much experience of it, even though I'm from here. I'm not really tied into crypto circles here, actually. But yeah, I mean, the anti-nation state message in the US was very resonant, and as you know, is anyway like a political tool. It's a narrative lever even outside of crypto. So the fact that crypto kind of was able to, I guess, lock into that as it grew was, I think, an important driver of interest. In Europe, it's also a little bit like in between. I mean, Germany and where I live and different parts of Europe, people are generally fairly trusting, I think, of the state. Maybe not quite as trusting as New Zealanders are of New Zealand. I think here there's a high level of trust in the state, as far as I can tell, and with good reason. It provides a good service. But yeah, I think the US, there's all these volatile, I guess, narrative cracks in that story. But it's also just vast, right? Like, it's just a really big country with lots of different types of people in it, and with lots of different realities. And yeah, I think the gap between somebody at the top of the triangle's experience and somebody at the bottom is really huge in the US, and perhaps less huge here, less huge in Germany and in Europe. So I guess there's less narrative opportunity there. But I was really interested to hear you say that the reasons why people get involved here are changing. And I'd also, I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate to do it at this stage, James, but I'm also very curious on your role and your involvement in crypto here. As I understand it, you were very early in your field convincing people that it was something worth doing. What were the narratives that you found useful with your peers, like saying, hey, this is something that we really need to get into now? It's other people in other countries are not doing this, but we should. Like, how did you convince people?
Look, I think that's it's a really interesting question. I think it's one that we discussed as a team and as a firm quite intensely.
Yeah, I bet.
And I think it comes from hopefully the same avenues that you both have come from, which is, hey, this is a new asset class. Mm-hmm. How often does this happen in your lifetime?
Right.
And you can deal with that in two ways. You
Right.
can go, it'll never take off, or I'll deal with it when it does.
Right.
And then I'll quickly scramble to learn as much as I can. And we were laughing before, but the internet will never take off type of analogy. Or you can go the other way, and you can go, actually, I'm going to be really curious about this. And hey, it might not be something that's interesting, but this looks like a monumental change in the landscape of how we deal with really simple concepts like payments and value.
Right.
That why not learn about it? And
But there's one thing learning about it, and another thing saying, like, we're going to take, a lot of trusted money from people in New Zealand that have given to, quite a trusted brand, right, who probably expect you to do certain things, probably not expect you to go with something that, in theory, at any point could go to zero, right? Like, that's got to be a very hard decision to
absolutely.
to make.
And when you're investing, it's all about what the risk return is, and really that comes down to therefore what the size of the position is in your portfolio.
Right.
And absolutely, there's uncertainty, but there's uncertainty around all asset classes. Oil prices went negative in 2020.
Good point.
If you owned anything to do with oil,
Right.
You were not at zero, you were underwater. But I think what really interested us is, and I guess the catalyst, and we've talked to our clients before about this, the real catalyst for us to go in with some confidence is that adoption by the mainstream. So in 2020, near the end of 2020 and early 2021, big corporate banks were holding it in custody. There were platforms on banks that we had long-term relationships with. You didn't actually have to buy the physical crypto at the start. You could just use futures contracts.
Right.
And so the journey, I always sort of attain it to, you can't go from having none in your portfolio to having a big position in your portfolio with your own personal NZ Funds wallet.
Right.
But if you just go through the journey step by step, let's look at and research it. Then let's think about using futures contracts. Then let's set up custody and maybe own the physical. And then actually let's use it as a risk management tool. When crypto is going up, we can help our clients profit from it and learn about it and be educated by it. But when it's going down, we don't have to be there, or we can even hedge our portfolios using crypto, and it's a great hedge versus other asset classes like the technology sector. So I think it's like your journey. It didn't just sort of go from nothing to wham. It bubbled away.
And is DeFi a part of that for both of you as well? Like, is that something that resonates, or is something that's very active in both of your situations?
I think it's like the start.
Right.
For us, it was it's just a natural journey into looking at DeFi.
Yeah.
NFTs are really interesting, and not just for us, perhaps it's not the art itself, but it's the platforms and the organisations that are supporting those artists and musicians and things like that. It's just like investing in a tech startup, but in a different
bit more
domain.
volatile.
Yeah, but a bit more volatile.
Depending on the company, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, everybody. Have you heard of Pets.com? The company. Well,
Made an artwork about that, actually. Yeah. Well, I made a crypto artwork, but my biggest NFT.
we've got room, and if you want to join the investment team,
I'd love to. I made a piece called .com Seance, which is my biggest NFT project to date, which is I chose 20 amazingly spectacular burnouts from 2001's crash and decided to kind of resurrect them in Web3 via NFTs. So Pets.com was one of those, but also amazing companies like CashWars.com, FinancialPrinter.com, StickyNetworks.com, Funbug.com, like all these amazing .coms that you've never heard of. Funbug, actually, the founder of that went on after the crash to create GoPro, so it's not not unknown people, but I kind of took those assets. I plugged them into an early version of what everybody now is using, like a DALL-E type thing, where it's you write a description in to an AI and it makes an image. And I said, company that called Pets.com that looks at selling pets to the world or something like that, and then it would dream up a bunch of logos for what that might have been. And then I gave those selections to a legend in NFTs, the artist that drew the cats for CryptoKitties. So it was a collaborative piece, and I said, hey, look at all these machine-generated assets, and you create one beautiful version of one of those, one finished version in your own kind of aesthetic, and that will be our top-tier CEO asset, and then we'll sell the machine learning logos as a kind of middle management asset, and we'll restart these companies as a seance in Web3. So that was .com seance. So pets.com stories, I think, and these stories have kind of boom and bust. I think, again, from a cultural perspective, from an artist perspective, it's such a compelling thing, right? It's like life, things come, things go. Things are very exciting for a moment and then seem horrible the next. And I think those financial stories, those company stories, for me, reframing them as cultural stories, but being able to do that within a kind of new asset is also just the most exciting thing to be able to do as an artist.
I mean, what a great introduction, I guess, to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the volatility that we've had recently. I was at a conference earlier this year where there were thousands of people, but even more surprising, thousands of companies showcasing their wares.
Where was this?
This was in the US. At the Bitcoin conference.
Oh, right. In Miami.
Bitcoin Miami?
Yeah.
Bitcoin Miami, yeah.
And what was both amazing was the amount of people and just the total acceptance of the asset class amongst 30,000, 40,000 people that attended. But also just the number of companies involved. And perhaps it was like the .com boom, sometimes you look at the price volatility and that's going to cause some companies to no longer be able to exist in their current form. And that's kind of a good thing because out of the tech, and I'm not saying, talking to an artist about Amazon, there's probably heaps of works you can do about that company, but
I've done also.
Of course, yeah. But it has come out of the ashes as an amazing company. Now we can discuss whether it's provided a social good or not to the community. But what an amazing story from a technology blow up in the early part of the century. But Janine, how do you see the volatility play out in terms of you see in the media that that's the end of cryptocurrency? It was really fun, but now it's time to look at something else.
I wonder if Simon's done artwork for every time someone's called the end of Bitcoin or the death of crypto.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go, next week. I gotta say, Simon's job sounds very fun. I picked the wrong player. But no, it's an interesting one, right? Because we talked before about how it's easy to think, I'm too late, I've missed the boat, and that's every time it goes up, and then every time it goes down, it's like, oh, that's the end of that. It's it's never coming back. And I don't think either of those statements are true. What we see with the volatility, you have to sort of step back and take a long-term view on this and sort of look at fundamentally, is this asset class and is the technological use case this is providing something that is going to help the world in the future? And if you think about the way we do value at the moment is not digital, but our lives are increasingly digitizing. Everything we do is moving into digital spheres, and digital is more efficient, more effective. It enables, cross-border, enables instantaneous, it's low cost. And so financial markets will move digital. Financial products and services will become digitized. And which cryptocurrencies will be the winners in that? That's hard to tell. How will that interplay with central bank digital currencies, with private sector currencies, which so far I think, Libra as an example haven't fared particularly well, but I think those will become things in the future. And NFTs have been a really interesting foray for private sector companies into cryptocurrency in a way that is more accepted than, say, launching a coin. So that's sort of the big picture around, the volatility is very much small, right now what's happening this week, this month. Long term, I think there's, very good reason to be bullish on cryptocurrency, not financial advice. But in the short term, the volatility is fascinating. It's really interesting being at the coalface and seeing what is moving cryptocurrency, what is making the changes. What I've seen this year is you've got, the financial markets overall are down around, 17%, tech stocks down around 27%, then crypto down around 47% was, the last figures I saw. So it's mirroring what is happening in the traditional financial markets, but just taking it a little bit more extreme, more volatile. And I think this volatility is driven by partially the immaturity of the sector. We've got a sector that is very, very liquid, it's 24/7 traded, which you don't see in most other markets. So it can respond very quickly. It's had a lot of institutional money coming in, like you're talking, James, in 2020, 2021. There was a lot of institutional funds coming in, which provides this, risk-averse large positions that can be traded very, very liquid, very mobile.
Yeah, they're less likely to be hodlers.
Exactly. and that drives a lot of the volatility. And then, of course, you've got all of, the macroeconomic uncertainties, which, tend to shape the crypto markets more because they've got that liquidness. You see that, maybe we call it liquefaction in those markets much more quickly. So yeah, the short-term volatility is really interesting. It's fascinating being at the coalface. So I've seen how that drives retail customer behaviour. But personally, as an investor myself, I just sort of step back and kind of ignore the day-to-day price movement and just sort of take that long-term view.
Does it provide opportunity for your business to maybe broaden the number of different cryptos on Easy Crypto because people want to diversify their assets, or is it something that people just have gone, okay, this is really interesting, I'm just going to stick to Bitcoin until things play out? How have you seen that?
Yeah, so we have we sell around 160 different crypto assets, and we're always adding more. We're sort of very responsive to, our customers can vote for what they want us to list next, and as long as something's not a clear Ponzi scheme or otherwise a bad choice, we'll pop it up on the platform. And we see a lot of interesting trends in what people are buying and selling at different times with different price action. There is always a skew towards Bitcoin and Ethereum. We've seen Solana be a hugely more popular coin in the last couple of months, which is interesting because that network has had a lot of challenges and also a lot of volatility. But in terms of sort of the opportunity that the volatility gives to expand into more coins, I think actually when markets are dropping, people tend to move more towards this, I don't know if I'd call them safer coins, but let's say larger cap coins, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then when markets start to move up again, we see that sort of diversification back out into more altcoins, and I guess people taking more of a punt on what might be increasing in value more and trying to find things that will grow at a faster rate than the big cap coins.
Interesting, and it's something that I guess is ever evolving and news flow driven, but it's also, as the world returns to a little bit more normality, perhaps you're getting holders that are less around making a fast buck and more about long-term holders like you are personally in the space.
Yeah, and I think also, that what you were saying with your with NZ funds is like it's around a portfolio management, and that's what we're seeing a lot of is people looking at cryptocurrency as, okay, this asset is matured to a point where it is worth looking at as part of a diversified portfolio. There's a lot of commentary around, maybe say up to 5% of your portfolio in cryptocurrency. Obviously, some of us like me have a lot more, but, for a traditional investor, for someone who has, a wealth management approach across a portfolio of assets, this is one that we see people putting into. And right now, this is a relatively, comparatively to where we were at the beginning of this year, last year, this is actually a good entry point for people who are looking at having that diversification of assets in their portfolio.
Can I also ask a question related to, and both of you probably are more aware of this than I am, so you're talking about your company is providing access for consumers to the asset class, right? In some ways, that's the primary goal of it. Do you see other peers in the space building, like New Zealand based people or coming up with, or entrepreneurs based here building things on top of existing crypto networks like Ethereum, like on the application layer? Is that a big scene here?
It's something I think, again, there's that opportunity. We could be a lot bigger because New Zealanders are very innovative. We've got good tech savvy capabilities. There's a couple of great projects like Akala, which is it's a DeFi layer on top of Polkadot. Their team is based here in Auckland. We've got a couple of other sort of like innovations that sit on top of cryptocurrency or blockchain networks, but not as many as I would expect given how, innovative New Zealanders are. And I think, possibly that comes down to the regulatory complexity, or possibly it's just this is still a nascent space. And but there is some interesting stuff going on. I'd love to see more happening out of New Zealand.
The one that I know about is again, maybe this is coming more from the artist side, but there's a project called Scuttlebutt, which I don't know if you got. Yeah, this is an amazing project. It's like more peer-to-peer internet, but there's an adjacency to crypto and assets, and that's has a big New Zealand footprint, which I found really interesting.
I wonder if in the early adoption phase of it for New Zealand, we're in the early adoption phase, even though we're probably 10 years behind, which.
Or not, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that narrative anymore. Yeah,
but I think, it's a good challenge. But I wonder if the initial stages is people like you did with your art go overseas, and so there's some. I do know of many New Zealanders who are overseas within the space, connecting internationally
for sure.
And then it takes those people to even visit like you are, and we'll get on to why you're back, because I know you're here to see your parents, I'm sure, but also I'm sure it's not just for that reason. I get told off when I see my family who live in the UK, and they always are sceptical why I'm visiting. And I say it's to see you, and they go, no, it's not. But anyway, I digress. Do you think that it's just there's lots of people learning about it elsewhere? It's an international asset class. There's no borders. You've got how many different countries?
We have staff in 11 different countries, and we started as a remote first business, and we still are heavily remote. And I think to that point of there are a lot of New Zealanders all around the world doing amazing things. Yeah. And there is no Simon's a borderless artist. We're a borderless company. There's a lot of ability for people to work from wherever in the world, contribute to New Zealand projects, or just to the wider New Zealand knowledge base in the space. And I think there is a lot of that happening.
I love like leaning in more, actually, again from a cultural perspective, into that version of being a New Zealander. I guess again, just to speak purely from that perspective, you know, I love where I grew up. I love coming back here. I love interactions with people who are here. I love meeting people who are from here over in other parts of the world, and they're often doing very interesting things. This is also something interesting, and I'd love to see some kind of self-imagining of the national identity lean more into that side of, yes, we're from here, but we also have a very, you know, many of us are ancestrally travelers, independent of different backgrounds. We all have international outlooks and roots. We're kind of a nation of different types of travelers, and I think leaning into that version of a national identity in the future would be something that I would really like to see flower. You know, rather than trying to say we're restricted to this island, we're restricted to the things that happen on this island. Everything that's symbolic about this country is important to this island only. I think this is actually one of the amazing opportunities about our story. It's a really complex one, and there's old ways of seeing it as international through the colonial history, but there's newer ways of seeing it as international through kind of a lot of asset class activity. And I know New Zealand is quite an advanced place financially anyway, right? It's not just crypto where there's future first activity happening, right? There's other.
Absolutely, I think it's, you know, we've made leaps and bounds in that respect, and I think it's from that attitude of we can't just stay here and look within our borders, that you have to be open and I think that's why I'm really positive about crypto for New Zealand, because I think there is this willingness to accept new things and new technology and new people and learn about it. Simon, in the time we've got left, and Janine, in terms of what's next, so we'll start with you, Simon. You're here for there's 2 exhibitions going on.
That's right.
I hope your parents don't listen to this. I'll get into trouble.
Oh, they know. They've been at every event that have happened. Yeah, I mean it's great to see my mum and dad and my sister and my nephew.
And your dad he is an artist as well.
He
right?
is an artist. Yeah, he made books, and actually he's part of the show. So I've made 2 exhibitions, one at Michael Lett Gallery, and one at the University of Auckland's kind of Kunsthalle, which is the Gus Fisher Gallery, just on Shortland Street here. Both are called Creation Stories. It's a collaboration with an academic, a friend of mine, who is an expert in indigenous space. She's at the University of Auckland's Architecture School. But we came together over exactly these types of international stories that I was hinting towards, because we started talking about Samoa once when I came back on a visit, and she's Samoan, but she's also has roots in Tonga and the Solomon Islands, but also in Zug. In Switzerland, and turns out her cousin is a guy called Luca Müller, who is a very important guy at MME, which is a legal firm, and Luca designed the legal framework for the Ethereum token sale. And so we started talking about the history of value and family connections, and my family has a connection to Samoa as well, because my great-grandfather was the first Chief Justice of Samoa when New Zealand took the occupation off the Germans. So there was all these kind of interesting interconnections that I started to map with her, and we made these kind of giant diagrams of financial stories, of company stories, of colonial stories, and we kind of put them together and kind of made them physical using kind of cabling factory here, Swartec, at Ardmore, and they built it into these kind of giant webs of cables, which we then also turned into ETH miners. So there's literally family stories producing value in these spaces as sculptures. There's also resonances with other artworks that we've put alongside, other ways of seeing value through interconnection. So painters like Buck Nin, hugely visible Māori painter, early Māori contemporary artist. There's paintings of his that also kind of bring together different layers of stories. Obviously, in cultures like Māori culture, family is more foregrounded as you're kind of more of an embedded self where you're connected all the time to your ancestors, etc. I don't want to paraphrase that in a bad way, but we looked at different types of framing, interconnection, and social value, and made these kind of giant social graphs in a way that.
And it sort of showed you the journey, and some of them are even the journey of fiat currency to crypto, but
Exactly.
tied in with all the influences of people. And
Yeah, so another story which is weird is like my great uncle Gilbert Wilson was the head of the Reserve Bank during the 50s and 60s, and he stewarded the move from pounds to New Zealand dollars, which is also another interesting kind of financial story, but a family story. So yeah, lots of crazy interconnections there.
I don't believe in fate, but it just feels like this is a natural journey for you.
It's a very natural journey for me, but that's one thing that I'm working on. And the other thing in terms of making sculptural miners at the moment, it's, as I mentioned, ETH miners are they might be at the end of their story. So it could be the end of a creation story for a particular type of ETH production. And I'm also producing an NFT at the moment, which will, with a company called JPEG.space, which is like a beautiful NFT curatorial protocol project, where they are producing a very special kind of memorial for the merge, where a bunch of NFTs will get sold to support the ETH developers, because actually, if you're an ETH developer, there can be upside from holding if you invest it, but you actually don't get paid that much. And the ETH Foundation is structured in a particular way where, the rewards are not in salaries in the same way that they might be in other parts of technology or finance. So we're doing a kind of fundraiser where I'm developing a special memorial NFT alongside other artists for the merge. So that's kind of like not about these two exhibitions, but simultaneous. That'll happen while the exhibition's on.
Fantastic. And Janine, with your business, and we've seen stability in crypto assets for the past probably 2 weeks. So
even gone.
That's about 12 years in crypto years, right?
Exactly right. No, but in all seriousness, what's next for Easy Crypto and your own personal journey around, where you want the business to go, but also, your exploration through this asset class and maybe other things that you're doing?
Yeah, so for us, we had a really interesting time. Last year we did our Series A raise, which I think was a record set for the largest first raise for any company. We'd been bootstrapped up to that point, and then we managed to get a whole lot of investment from New Zealand and overseas investors, which has really set us up well to weather over the, call it a crypto winter or bear market, whatever the next, period of years. I think will probably be less frothy in the crypto markets, which is good. It means for us that we can really focus on product innovation, building amazing tech, and really sort of working on what is next at the forefront of cryptocurrency. So the first thing that's dropping for us from that, which should be out in the New Zealand market in October, is a custody wallet, so really helping to solve that problem for Kiwis and our overseas customers as well around that journey from fiat into crypto needs to land in a wallet somewhere. Traditionally, we haven't been a wallet provider, but now we see that that's a role that, with our ability to develop really good user experience and do things really safely, that's a space that we want to move into and play in. So that's the next big move for us. And then off the back of that, we'll obviously be enabling a whole lot of other product innovation, things like, looking at what's happening in DeFi, bringing the best of that world into our platform and offering for our customers, a safe and easy way to use a whole range of different services that crypto is innovating on, and really leveraging more of what's at the forefront there, which is a really exciting space to be playing in. Exciting.
So plenty of things happening, and fantastic to get that Series A, because that gives you the runway and the ability and flexibility to do it.
Absolutely, it couldn't have been better timed. I mean, I think the tech markets and sort of publicly listed companies have all taken a bit of a dive since October, so we had good timing there. But I do believe these things will come back up, and it's all cyclical. And luckily, we're in a position now that we don't need to worry about funding for a couple of years.
Well, Janine Grainger,
not like ETH developers.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, you should buy generously.
I will.
I was going to end it there, but then I thought a better way to end it is, do you have any more questions for each other? Because this is a community asset class, and this is a time where there's not often that you're in the same room as each other. So
I mean, I'm going to ask a very obvious question: do you have plans to touch NFTs at any point, or do you already do so?
We don't at the moment, but again, this is this type of thing that having custodial solutions really enables. So definitely keen to. NFTs is such a fascinating topic, though, and I know we're wrapping up soon, so I won't dive into it. But I think there's a lot for us around our 3 pillars at Easy Crypto around ease, ethics, and education. And so making sure we have the education available for people as they work in the space, but also that ethical lens of there's a lot of scams that are happening always at the forefront of cryptocurrency, and NFTs is a bit of a ripe area. And, it's unfortunate that's something that is really a gateway for a lot of mainstream people coming into our industry, is also really rife with Ponzi schemes and different scams. So
I have an idea. You guys should build the first private collection of blue chip NFTs that a company holds in New Zealand as a way also of doing education to see which things are not Ponzi schemes. That would be such a wonderful contribution to my sphere and also lift the visibility here, because I think, again, art NFTs are not hugely visible here. And so it would be great to see somebody on the forefront like you are of providing customer access to also maybe provide a sort of what would you say, like a role model leader in what kind of crypto culture could look like.
And that's a really interesting parallel to a lot of, big investment companies and houses here in New Zealand have quite amazingly wealthy private art collections.
Exactly.
So for us to model that behavior, and not necessarily that we're going to build a lot of wealth out of buying NFTs, but at least showcasing what is out there, and in an interesting parallel to how traditional finance have done things.
Exactly. I mean, there's also a lot of value there, and those institutional collections, those private collections that some of the big corporate firms have here in New Zealand of New Zealand art are like really amazing. And they bought them at a time where I think that asset class probably also was a little bit questionable. Like, do you really spend X amount of money on a contemporary artist's painting that was made this year? Do you really know what it's going to be worth in 10 years? I bet they didn't know at that point. So I think there's parallels there to double down on New Zealand's role as a company.
It sounds like we've got a pretty good collaboration. And I know this person that's sort of working on an NFT.
Well, that was actually my question for Simon. I was interested to know what platforms, like what blockchains are you using for your NFTs, and what platforms, and sort of what's your decision-making criteria in choosing which platforms and blockchains you work with?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. For me, I really try to mint on ETH if I can, because it's the biggest network, the most art is there, the most commercial action is there, the most visibility is there, the most infrastructure is there. OpenSea is like the kind of, and Zora, those are maybe the two most visible secondary platforms that also you can mint for primary, but they're kind of like the auction houses, the kind of Sotheby's and Christie's, let's say, of the crypto first art world. I'll mint on ETH if I can. I've also minted on Tezos, which I think has an interesting community as well. They're putting a lot of effort into arts infrastructure. I also have minted on Polygon because it's free, and is also still visible on OpenSea, which I think is a big place for discovery of NFTs. But those are the ones I've mostly touched. I haven't touched Solana, even though Melania did the Solana one. I thought, that's maybe not. But again, I'm not kind of against minting on any particular platform, and I think things like Polkadot are interesting players. Parity is based out of Berlin, so it's also kind of an interesting thing on the doorstep. But yeah, I think just the visibility, the history, the flexibility of ETH-based coins are the most attractive to me. And with the merge, I mean, the only pushback you ever get on that as an artist, rightly so, because people are really interested in the art world and in culture around the environment. They often ask questions about the power consumption of minting on ETH, and I think with the merge and those questions disappearing, I can't see other platforms at this stage, or other coins at this stage, being more attractive.
Janine, Grainger, Simon, Denny, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I could do this for the next couple of hours, but time has told us that we have to draw this to a close. But look, your journeys are so interesting, and we really appreciate your thoughts and views, and would love to do this again. And like you say, one day in crypto land is sort of 12 years, but imagine catching up in a year or so's time and doing it again and
have
see
a school
what's changed.
reunion.
Yeah, I would love that. I mean, thank you very much. It's really great to speak to people here who are as interested and passionate as you both are. That's so inspiring for me, coming back and connecting with people who are working at this level. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Thanks, Simon. Great to do this with you guys, and do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Cheers.
This has been the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds. New Zealand Funds Management Limited is the issuer of the NZ Funds KiwiSaver scheme, the NZ Funds Managed Superannuation Service, the NZ Funds Advised Portfolio Service, the NZ Funds Wealth Builder, and NZ Funds Income Generator. A product disclosure statement for each is available at nzfunds.co.nz. Past performance is not necessarily an indicator of future returns.